Welcome back to Crime Podcastle. It's episode 13 of our Twisted Love Crimes of Passion series. And today we're diving into a case from 2018, the All Were Love murder. It's a case where romance and societal pressures collide, ending in a truly heartbreaking tragedy.
Yeah, this case really pulls back the curtain on the tension between love and what society expects. It makes you think, how can love, something that's supposed to be so joyful, turn so dark and violent?
And that's what we're going to unpack today. So first, let's meet the couple at the center of this story, Nikhil and Priya. Nikhil, a 27-year-old software engineer, ambitious, kind, real romantic, He was doing well for himself in Jaipur, had a bright future ahead. And Priya, she was a 24-year-old college student living with her conservative family in Almar. But despite that upbringing, she had this free spirit, wanted to make her own choices.
Right. And their paths crossed, like so many of these stories do, at a friend's wedding back in 2017. That connection, it was instant, intense. Their relationship took off fast. They had this shared dream of overcoming any obstacle. But that happiness, it was fleeting. Priya's family, especially her brother Rohit, they were fiercely against the relationship.
This sounds like a classic Romeo and Juliet situation. But was it more than just overprotective family members? Was there something else going on?
You're picking up on something important there. While the initial disapproval, yeah, it might seem like a typical case of family being overprotective, there's a much bigger issue at play, a deep-rooted societal one, the caste system. See, Priya's family, they saw Nikhil as an outsider, a threat to their family's honor because they were from different castes. It wasn't just a personal dislike, it was this deep-seated societal norm. Where family honor, tied to caste, was more important than individual happiness, more important than being able to choose who you love.
It's hard to believe that even in the 21st century, these ancient social structures can have such power and often lead to tragic outcomes. So, how did Nikhil and Priya respond to this opposition? Did they give in, or did they fight for their love?
They chose to resist. Fueled by their love and their dreams for the future, they kept meeting in secret, hoping love would be enough to overcome these massive obstacles.
Almost like they were living a double life, wanting a future together, but with this threat of societal disapproval hanging over them. But that secrecy couldn't last forever, could it? What was it that brought everything to a head?
The pressure on Priya, it just kept building. And it wasn't just words. Her family actively tried to separate them. They went to great lengths to isolate her, to control every move she made. And all that pressure, it took a toll. Priya, she was torn between her love for Nikhil and the loyalty she felt to her family. She started pulling away from the relationship.
I can't imagine how torn she must felt. The man she loved on one side and her family, the traditions she'd grown up with on the other. What did Nikhil make of all this?
Well, he was heartbroken, of course. He couldn't understand why Priya, who had said she loved him, was pushing him away. And that confusion, that heartbreak, it all adds to the tragedy that's about to unfold.
And this is where things, I'm guessing, take a dark turn.
They do. Priya, under immense pressure from her family, became a part of their terrible plan. They made her lure Nikhil to a meeting, but it was all a lie, a trap.
That's just chilling. To think they used her like that. She became a victim of their desperation to protect what they saw as their honor, even if it meant her happiness, and in the end, even if it meant someone's life.
That betrayal, it's really at the heart of this case. You see, it wasn't just about stopping a relationship, it was about control, about forcing this strict societal structure, even if it meant someone had to die. Using Priya like that and what happened next, it shows just how devastating those kinds of social rules can be.
It's hard to grasp the level of control they had over her. They took away her ability to make her own choices, turning her into a tool for their awful plan.
Exactly. And this brings us to May 15th, 2018. That evening, Nikhil, he had no idea what was waiting for him. He went to a remote spot outside of Alwar. He thought he was going to meet Priya to try and work things out, get back the love they had. But instead, he walked into an ambush.
It's a pretty disturbing picture you're painting here. Can you take us through what happened during that ambush?
So Rohit and two guys he'd hired, they were waiting for Nikhil. And when he got there, it was brutal. They attacked him, accusing him of dishonoring their family. Nikhil, he pleaded with them, begged for mercy, but they wouldn't listen. They beat him with rods, stabbed him with knives, left him there to die.
God, the terror he must have felt. Thinking he was going to meet Priya, and then suddenly being attacked by her family, the people who should have been protecting her. This wasn't just a crime of passion, it was calculated, cold. It shows how far some people will go to protect what they see as their family's honor, even if it means taking a life.
You're absolutely right. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. This was premeditated murder. planned out carefully to send a message rooted in this twisted idea of honor and control. And Priya, forced into this horrifying situation, having to watch the man she loved being murdered. The scars from that night, they'll stay with her forever.
It's just tragic. Her story, a victim of manipulation, societal pressure, and violence. Trapped in a situation she couldn't escape, her life shattered just like Nikhil's.
Absolutely. The next morning, when they found Nikhil's body, it shook the town of Alwar. The police launched a huge investigation, and that's where we see the pieces of this puzzle start coming together.
So how did the investigation go? It seems like a pretty straightforward honor killing, but I'm sure there's more to it.
Isn't there always? Well, the police, they started by talking to people who might have seen something. And a few folks near the crime scene, they said they'd seen Nikhil's car there the night before. That put him at the scene right away. And luckily, they found his phone in the car. And like we see a lot these days, that phone became a goldmine of evidence.
The digital trail. Hard to commit a crime these days without leaving some trace online.
Exactly. And in this case, Nikhil's phone records, they were key to figuring out what led up to his murder. The police, they tracked his calls, his messages, and they put together a timeline of when he talked to Priya. And that exposed the whole plan, showed it was all premeditated.
But what about Priya? Didn't she try to protect her family, the ones who made her lure Nikhil to his death?
At first, yeah, she did try to cover for them. She was terrified, confused, probably dealing with a ton of guilt and trauma, but that truth, the horror of what she'd seen, it was just too much to keep inside.
The guilt must have been crushing.
It was, and that guilt, the fear of living with that secret, it made her break down. She told the police everything, the whole plan, how her family had used her, how they set up the ambush, and the violence that followed.
Hearing her tell all that, it must have been devastating for her family. But it was a huge break for the prosecution, right?
Oh, definitely. With Priya's confession, the phone records, and the forensic evidence from the crime scene, the police had a rock-solid case. They arrested Rohit and the two guys he hired, and under questioning, they admitted their part in the murder.
So justice was served. Or maybe the better question is, can there really be justice in a situation this heartbreaking?
That's a deep question, one that hangs over this whole case. Early 2019, the trial began, and the whole country was watching. This wasn't just a local crime anymore. It became a national discussion about honor killings, the pressure society puts on people, and what happens when people blindly follow these outdated traditions.
The prosecution, they must have had a really strong case with Priya's testimony and all that evidence.
They did. They laid out everything very carefully, using what Priya said, the phone records, the forensic evidence. They proved this wasn't some crime of passion, but a cold-blooded murder planned out to protect the so-called honor of the family.
What about the defense? What was their angle?
Well, they were fighting an uphill battle, you can imagine. They tried to say Rohit just snapped, that he wasn't thinking clearly. They tried to make it seem like he was a brother enraged by what he saw as dishonor, lost control, lashed out.
But that wouldn't hold up against the evidence, would it? Especially with Priya saying what she did and the fact that Rohit hired those other guys.
Nope, it wouldn't. The evidence that it was all planned out, it was overwhelming. The judge, the jury, they saw right through what the defense was trying to do, trying to make it seem less serious. And in late 2019, they reached a verdict.
And what was the verdict?
Guilty. Rohit and the two guys who helped him, they were convicted of murder, sentenced to life in prison. Their actions, all driven by this warped idea of honor and control, it cost them their freedom, left a mark on their lives they can't erase.
What about Priya? What happened to her after all of this?
Priya's story is complicated. She wasn't charged with anything, but society blamed her for what happened. Remember, she was the one who led Nikhil to that meeting, even though her family forced her to do it.
So people saw her as both a victim and someone who played a part in it all. An impossible situation.
Exactly. It's a tough thing to understand. On one hand, she was used by her family, controlled by them. But her actions, even though she didn't want to do it, they contributed to Nikhil's death.
God, that's a heavy burden to carry. I can only imagine the emotional scars she lives with. Did she stay in Alwar?
She didn't. After the trial, she left. She moved away from the town that held so much pain. She tried to rebuild her life, carrying the weight of her past and the judgment of everyone around her.
This case shows just how much damage these strict social structures can do, especially to women like Priya. They're caught in the middle, trying to balance what they want with what society demands of them.
You're right. Priya's story is a reminder that in these power struggles, women are often used as pawns, forced to make choices that have terrible consequences no matter what they choose.
It reminds us that sometimes, Even when the legal system does its job, the pain goes much deeper, the effects last far longer than just the trial. This case, as tragic as it is, it started an important conversation across India about honor killings, about needing stronger laws to protect people, and the need to challenge those outdated social norms that lead to this violence.
That conversation, it needs to keep going. Not just in India, but everywhere. We have to challenge these harmful traditions and build a world where love is something to celebrate, not punish, where people can make their own choices about who they love without these outdated ideas of honor and control getting in the way.
This case really shows how deep these societal norms go, how hard they are to break free from.
Absolutely. We owe it to Nikhil, to Priya, to everyone who suffered because of these traditions, to create a world where love wins over hate, where individual freedom is more important than what society dictates.
It makes you think, doesn't it? How many other Priyas are out there stuck in these situations, forced to make these impossible choices with awful consequences?
Exactly. It's not just a few isolated stories. It's a sign of a bigger problem in society. And it's only by talking about it openly, educating ourselves and each other, and being willing to challenge how things are that we can create a world where love isn't a crime, where people's choices are respected, even celebrated.
It reminds us that we all have a part to play in making the world more just, more compassionate.
Yeah.
Speaking up against injustice, supporting those organizations fighting for human rights, learning about these issues and telling others.
Yeah.
Every little bit helps,
Yeah.
makes a difference.
Yeah, it's about having empathy, understanding, and being willing to look at our own biases, our assumptions. We can build a culture where differences are celebrated, where love in all its forms is embraced, not something to be scared of.
Well, on that note, we've come to the end of another episode of Crime Podcastle's Twisted Love, Crimes of Passion. Thanks for joining us on this journey.
And remember, even though these stories can be tough to hear, they give us a glimpse into what it means to be human, into the things that shape our world, and they show us that we all have the power to make things better.
If this episode got you thinking, share it with your friends, your family, post it on social media. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to Crime Podcastle so you don't miss out on our next episode. We'll be back with more stories of love, betrayal, and that dark side of human nature.
Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and as always, stay vigilant.